Trump is a notoriously capricious and mercurial figure. But whatever Trump decides, he will do. We know that JD Vance has been surprised sometimes by what Trump has chosen to do. So David Lammy's influence will be marginal, peripheral, nugatory even.
Now, there is a lot to get through, so let's dive straight in.
Summer loving had me a blast.
Summer loving happened so fast.
I met a girl crazy for
This weekend at Chevening House in Kent, reputedly the inspiration for Rosings Park in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, an unexpected summer bromance played out this weekend as Foreign Secretary David Lammy welcomed the US Vice President JD Vance to his little place in the country for a spot of fishing and some getting-to-know-you chit-chat in front of the world's media. They say they are just good friends. Is this, Patrick, an even less likely romance than Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau?
Well, I think it's a reminder of the value of persistence in courting, as it were, or chirpsing, as the kids would say, because David Lammy has been putting the yards in with JD Vance for a very long time. You know, long before JD Vance, I think, was even selected to the Senate, selected for a Senate race in Ohio in 2022. David Lammy was chatting up JD Vance because he thought he was a coming man in the Republican Party, and that was spectacularly vindicated when he was selected as Donald Trump's running mate. So, look, even if it's an unlikely romance, you know, it's a reminder of... I'm going to leave that there. But that in some cases, if you break down someone's defences enough, that they will eventually, you know, succumb to your charms. And that's clearly what's happened with David Lammy and JD Vance.
Yeah, perseverance can be misinterpreted slightly these days. Michael, you're a hands across the aisle kind of a guy, and I like a bit of a ding-dong. Is this just a case of opposites attracting?
Well, I think David Lammy's gone out of his way, exactly as Patrick says, to try to find points of contact. So it's almost as though he's gone on to JD Vance's dating profile to try to work out what the areas are where they overlap.
God, I wonder what that looks like.
Anyway, so on the Vance Bumble or Hinge, obviously faith and poverty background come up, and so David Lammy said, well, funnily enough, I'm a churchgoer too, and by the way, I didn't have such an easy path into power. And on that basis, they've clicked. And it's been, I think, to Lammy's credit, exactly as Patrick pointed out, that in the crowded ballroom of Republican talent, in the mosh pit of American politics, he locked eyes on JD at an early stage, and therefore, as a result, they've been, you know, best buddies, perhaps something more since then.
And we sort of now think of David Lammy as a sort of garden variety member of the Labour Party soft left, but you'll remember, Michael, actually has quite idiosyncratic blue Labour inflected politics. I mean, remember what he said after the riots about people needing to smack their children a bit more. There is that sort of core in him of quite flinty, sort of old right of the Labour Party, self-reliance, graft, bootstraps doctrine, that he doesn't really get the chance to say that much anymore. One, it's not in his brief, and two, it's not really politically expedient if you want to ascend the ranks in Labour politics. But I'm sure
he's got a little bit of hillbilly elegy in him.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe, you know, when the lights dim and they're waiting for their bus home, that's the sort of thing they chat about when they know nobody else is listening.
I do want to play a little clip of their conversation about fishing.
So we've already, in the brief time that we've been here, my kids have fallen asleep on your floor. We've gone fishing in the lake outside, and unfortunately, the one strain on the special relationship is that all of my kids caught a fish, but the Foreign Secretary did not. I'm sorry.
At that point, he patted the Foreign Secretary on the arm there. Are we learning something about David Lammy's psyche here, in that does he really just enjoy being negged?
I think, actually, David Lammy is one of those people who enjoys, as Patrick hinted, confounding expectations. So I was once at a dinner where David Lammy was chatting up Condoleezza Rice, so another big Republican name, and he was clearly charming her very effectively, judging from the tinkling laughter and the broad smiles on Condoleezza Rice's face. So I think there is something in David Lammy's character, which means, you know, whether or not you agree with his policies, that he has a certain charm that helps to win over people in the world of diplomacy. And so if it's a condescending pat on the arm, or if it's making sure that as he casts his flies, as it were, that he deliberately doesn't catch anything in order to make JD Vance seem like the superior sportsman, then it's all necessary for Team UK.
It's so much game. It is so much game. Patrick, should you ever go on holiday, even a weekend away with your colleagues?
You know, when I was listening to you trail this show on Breakfast, Jane, I was thinking, have I ever done that? And the most I can offer you is I once went to the Cotswolds with Will Lloyd, late of this parish, for the day.
Is that why you left?
I think it might have been, yeah. It was. I mean, that was about two or 3 years ago. So maybe it traumatised. It delayed onset trauma. And I've, Matt Chorley again, later this parish, not to advertise people. Yeah, well, indeed, yeah. I've been to his house in Fleet in Hampshire many times. Never stayed. So I wouldn't know. Now you mention it, I quite like to do it. There's lots of colleagues I'd like to, sit around a campfire with and tell ghost stories.
Yeah,
maybe.
I once went to Centre Parks with the features desk from London Light. That was messy. The bikes, the BMXs didn't all make it out that weekend. But then we went to Spain again together this summer. So, I have been on holiday with colleagues and it's worked.
But that's all you used to do, Michael. Holidays with colleagues and dinner parties and that sort of thing.
There were forced holidays, rather breaks. So from time to time, when I was a Conservative MP, we were all forced, or rather encouraged, to come together for away days. And that meant that in a rather anonymous Eastbourne or Buckinghamshire hotel, you had, it used to be 300, now it's rather fewer, Conservative MPs all cooped up together. I cannot, on a show before the watershed, run through exactly what happened at those events. Jake Berry, if you're listening, your secret is safe with me. But I won't go into any more detail about that. But I have also spent time away, holidays abroad, with colleagues, both people whom I work with in politics and people whom I work with in the media. And again, I wouldn't draw any hard and fast rules. It just depends on the individual.
Absolutely, I agree. On a serious note, of course, the point of the weekend was David Lammy was trying to get JD Vance to soften the US stance on Israel and Gaza. But just because he was in someone else's house, JD Vance made it clear that that didn't mean he was going to agree with them.
Obviously, the United Kingdom is going to make its decision. We have no plans to recognize a Palestinian state. I don't know what it would mean to really recognize a Palestinian state, given the lack of a functional government there.
It's also today being reported that they did yesterday discuss the details of the upcoming Alaska summit between Presidents Trump and Putin. Michael, do you think he will be successful, David Lammy, in his efforts to influence the Trump administration stance on either Gaza or its position going into the Alaska summit? I mean, will a luxury weekend away ever work in persuading anyone into anything?
It can sometimes, but I think that the course on both of those things is set insofar as there is a course which you can plot and define and say is definite, because of course Trump is a notoriously capricious and mercurial figure. But whatever Trump decides, he will do. We know that JD Vance has been surprised sometimes by what Trump has chosen to do. So David Lammy's influence will be marginal, peripheral, nugatory even. But to be fair to David Lammy, it doesn't harm, rather. It can only help if you've got a line in. A little bit of advance information about which way things are likely to go might mean that a diplomat somewhere or an influencer somewhere else might be able just to have a gentle touch on the tiller.
Before we move on, I do want to ask Michael, you lived for a little while in the Foreign Secretary's residence in London.
Yes.
Who was the biggest VIP you ever had for a sleepover at Carlton Gardens?
Well, a sleepover, I suppose the biggest actually was my son, Will. But there weren't many sleepovers there. I think
just parties on the roof, from what I know.
There were parties on the roof. But I think it was the case that there were one or two individuals who popped by from different political persuasions, but it's probably best if I safeguard their privacy.
Okay, there's so many secrets this morning that we'll have to do a late night version of this where we just get Michael a little bit tipsy and get him to reveal all. That'll be a podcast.
If only.
Yeah. Now, moving on. Sir Keir Starmer's lead over Nigel Farage in the public's opinion as to who would make the better Prime Minister has halved in 3 months, polling this week shows. Only 35% of Britons now say that Starmer makes a better Prime Minister than Farage might, according to a poll by YouGov. Meanwhile, Reform UK's support has risen across all demographics since the start of the year, especially with women, whose backing Farage has historically struggled to pick up. Patrick, if you were a careers coach, which, I mean, not in that jacket this morning, but, you're a sensible young man. How would you advise Keir Starmer to turn his sinking popularity around?
I was actually having this conversation in the pub with for the sake of accuracy and also their anonymity, I'll call a mid-ranking government figure yesterday.
Ooh, bird.
And we both very quickly concluded the answer to this question, which is the only question one considers when one meets a Labour figure for a pint or lunch or whatever nowadays. We both quickly concluded the answer was resign.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, look, the public don't like him. And I really, really, really... And from the briefings you see to sort of people like Jonathan Freedland and Andrew Marr in recent weeks, I mean, we are to assume they're briefings. It's sort of the Prime Minister sort of wants to focus on the things the public aren't noticing or appreciating. He doesn't really see the need for a story, to tell a story to the public, etc., etc. All fine, good luck, making incremental improvements to the country. But the fundamental thing is, one of the main problems with this government is the public really, really, really don't like the Prime Minister. And how you fix that, I don't know. And I'm inclined to believe it's probably beyond fixing.
OK, harsh assessment. Michael, you've also said this week in what The Independent called a withering assessment, possibly not as withering as the one that Patrick just made, that Farage isn't plausible or ready to be Prime Minister and still won't be in 4 years' time. I mean, can you see a world in which he ever would be?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I wasn't sure that my assessment was withering.
That's just what The Independent said.
Well, far be it from me to disagree with that magnificent title. But my point was, and I haven't changed my view in the last 4 days, that Nigel Farage still has a lot to prove. Of course he can be Prime Minister. He's ahead in the polls. The Reform in the last poll, I think, were 12 points ahead of Labour. There were 3 local government by-elections this week, including a defence of a seat that they won in the local elections earlier this year, which Reform won. So they're clearly in pole position. The challenge, and I think this is probably a view that even people in Reform would take, is... can Farage build a team around himself sufficiently strong that it looks like an alternative government? And can he have a package of policies which stand up to a degree of scrutiny in the run-up to a general election campaign? And those are the 2 big question marks, because it may well be that the country are so exasperated, to use a Scottish phrase, scunnered, with the political establishment, that they will vote for the most effective means of getting rid of Labour, and they don't want the Tories back. Reform are the obvious alternative, and they won't scrutinise too much because their anger, again, as Patrick indicated, is such that they will vote Reform anyway. But my hunch is still that there is a credibility test they have to pass.
Yeah, I would agree. But the problem, it's almost, we risk, as you say, Michael, making a category error in, and this is actually where, to Keir Starmer's, I wouldn't want to say credit, but Keir Starmer makes the point whenever he speaks to people about this, that it's about sort of the incremental small improvements, making the state less dysfunctional. Right? If he succeeds in that over the course of the next 4 years, maybe the levels of frustration will recede to a point that people are no longer making the judgment out of indignance and fury, at which point Farage is a less attractive option. But if the government isn't seen to do that, or if the public is already past that point, then the credibility test matters less. It's not saying it doesn't matter at all, because 6 weeks of Labour and the Conservatives and everybody else warning that Nigel Farage will tank your mortgage and with it the pound, and the pound and with it your mortgage, whatever, are clearly going to have an effect. But even the fury is still there, then it's clearly the credibility test matters a bit less. Yeah,
and I can't think of any areas where people will have noticed any improvements under this government. I'm trying to be completely fair. I think one of the few areas where there has been a perceptible improvement is in waiting lists in the NHS. But beyond that, I'm not aware of any areas where people will think or be able to point to evidence to say that as a direct result of the actions of this government, things are better So that anguish remains.
No, that's fair.
Two things. We do need to get to the news. I could listen to you two just slug it out all day. We have had a message in from someone called Ed Vasey who says, wow, I wasn't expecting Patrick to say that about the Prime Minister. Just before we do go to the news, Michael, you said the Spectator wouldn't be changing its allegiance anytime soon. If there was an election tomorrow, would you be happy endorsing Kemi Badenoch as the next Prime Minister?
Yes.
OK. It's more from Michael and Patrick coming up. You're listening to Jane Mulkerins on Times Radio. Now, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin will, of course, meet this Friday in the US state of Alaska in an attempt to broker a ceasefire in Ukraine. Trump has told President Zelensky, who will not be at the meeting so far, to get ready to sign something, and warned Ukraine to prepare for the swapping of some territories to the betterment of both. According to reports, Putin has relaxed his initial demand to annex the 5 eastern Ukrainian provinces of Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk and Crimea, and he's told Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy this week, that he would settle for Donetsk in addition to the captured provinces of Crimea, which would then be recognised as sovereign Russian territory, as well as Luhansk. Michael, this isn't what we sort of strictly understand swapping to be, is it? It's more just a case of Ukraine giving stuff to Russia.
Yes, I can't see which bits of Russia Vladimir Putin is going to give up to Zelensky. I think it's probably just language chosen in order to essentially create a sort of diplomatic fog under which Ukraine hands over its land permanently in return for a cessation of this conflict. Or rather, I would imagine actually a temporary cessation of this conflict, because I'm sure that Putin and those around him will take what they can, wait, and then launch again. That's what they did with Crimea. They invaded in over a decade ago, took it over, waited their chance, and then launched another attack. From Putin's point of view, he's made it perfectly clear that he doesn't regard Ukraine as a proper country.
I mean, talking of that diplomatic fog, do you think that this is a case of Putin sort of manipulating Trump's desire to have a sort of big media moment when he brokers some sort of deal? And really, it's just a case of Trump rewarding his aggression by holding this meeting?
I think it will certainly probably end up with Putin coming out ahead, but Trump, to be fair to him, I'm not sure I'm being fair, but still, wants desperately to be seen as a peacemaker by history. So he wants to end this conflict. He also wants to bring some sort of resolution, however messy, to the conflict in the Middle East. He has a sense of himself as someone who is naturally and instinctively opposed to not just American adventurism, but conflict across the globe. And he has this, to some, I'm sure, to me actually, probably, slightly fantastical notion that he is first in line for the Nobel Peace Prize. But whether or not that is a narcissistic delusion on his part, or actually something that is within the bounds of political possibility, it's still the case he's striving for it.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 10 years in America interviewing, people in Hollywood, and the campaigns that people launch for Oscars, it starts before they put a film out, and it does seem like that's sort of what Trump's doing with the Nobel Peace Prize.
Is it really that outrageous, though, if Trump brings an end, however messy, to the conflict in Gaza and the conflict in Ukraine, that he should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize? Barack Obama won it basically on the strength of 2 memoirs.
You're not wrong about that, but there's at least half the world's population that would object to Trump winning the Nobel Peace Prize, I think.
Well, yes, but fine.
You're just full of outrageous comments this morning. Have you been replaced overnight? This morning, Patrick, it is being reported that there's a chance that Zelensky might be invited to join this summit after all, which would obviously be incredibly historic and also just more fair, obviously. But would it help, do you think? Would it help to have that three-way? If this conflict's going to ever end, there needs to be some sort of deal, as Donald Trump would call it, doesn't there? And is Zelensky being there going to help get that over the line? Well,
look, Zelensky's public position, at least, is still pretty unyielding. I mean, everything he said this week is that he's unwilling to consider any movement from Ukraine's sovereign borders at all. So it probably suggests that that meeting would end in the way we suggest. We presume it would end if that is his publicly stated position. And I think, look, bluntly and uncomfortably for everybody, not least Zelensky, what a Trump-Putin summit reflects is actually how this is going to work. As in, this is going to be agreed over the head of Zelensky and he can get on board or he can't. That is ultimately the reality of Ukraine's geopolitical position.
Yeah, what do you think his future looks like in terms of leading Ukraine were that to happen? Were there to be a sort of carving up of Ukraine this Friday?
Well, it's a fascinating point, isn't it? I confess I don't know enough about sort of the view of Western Ukraine towards the Donbass and whether, you know, that has long been seen as basically a Russian exclave anyway. But, I mean, looking at the sort of protests in recent weeks against Zelensky and the allegations of corruption, you wonder whether it's a sort of Churchill 45 moment, you know, when the martial law is lifted and the Ukrainians may say, thank you very much for your service, but we now need to do something else.
Yeah. Certainly, it's not going to be quiet, whatever happens. Now, two big figures there, potentially three big figures, Putin, Trump and Zelensky. And my big guest today is the lyricist Sir Tim Rice, who, of course, has written lyrics for musicals, including The Lion King, Jesus Christ Superstar and Evita, all about the life of the Argentine political leader Eva Perón. Tim Rice told me which politician he thinks might make an interesting subject for a new musical.
Well, obviously Trump, I suppose. Keir Starmer would be good for people who had trouble sleeping.
Michael, coming to you first, which politician would you like to see a musical about?
Inevitably, it would have to be Margaret Thatcher. I think that you could have, you know, Nigel Lawson and Margaret Thatcher, their sort of intellectual love affair then collapsing. And you have, you know, Nigel being played by some, you know, brooding bass figure, and then Margaret Thatcher, I think, as a gilded soprano. So I'm probably making it seem more like an opera than a musical.
You could have some really good musical numbers around the miners' strike. Do you know what I mean? Some really good set pieces.
Completely,
yeah.
Yes.
Billy Elliot's a smash hit for that
exactly.
reason. Yeah.
Brassed off, you know, it's a good canon already.
And funnily enough, Charles Moore, the chairman of The Spectator, who wrote the best books on Margaret Thatcher, her definitive biography, called Volume 2, Everything She Wants.
Of course, which is
a Wham number.
Yes.
So I don't know if we could have an Andrew Ridgeley, Tim Rice collaboration
Option with a book by Charles Moore, as in a book in the musical sense.
Exactly.
Gosh, that's an interesting three-way. Patrick, my spies tell me that you're a playwright, or at least an aspiring playwright, in your spare time already. Are you telling me that there's your bed there is a political musical just waiting to be published by HarperCollins if they could bring out a drama? Just
to clarify, I mean, I don't know where this rumour has come from, but yeah, look, I'd love to write a play at some point. But I think the problem with political musicals too often, right? They seldom sort of break out the species barrier from the sort of thing you might put on stage at a theatre near Westminster for like 2 nights. And it's about it's always about Thatcher, right? It's always about Thatcher. That's the problem. So I don't know. And look, Hamilton. Who would have thought 15 years ago?
Right,
that,
Alexander Hamilton. Everyone would have said who?
A musical about Alexander Hamilton. So I don't know whether the answer to that is like a sort of 4-act opera about Ian Mikado, or you know. Something like that, or you know what I mean, like something about a really niche figure from British political history. I tell you what hasn't really been put on stage. Maybe I'm wrong. And this is an area of Michael's interest as well, but, you know, Irish revolutionary politics in the early 20th century. I mean, we've had a film about Michael Collins, but there's surely a great musical to be made of that, particularly in this era where everybody, you know, Irishness is in. So
Kneecap could do the soundtrack.
Yeah, well, look. That would be fantastic.
I think we've got something here, guys. I think we've got something here. Let's squeeze one more quick story in. On a related note, really, given, you know, some people like to go for dinner before they go to the theatre, 6 p.m. dinner bookings are booming, apparently. According to data from Open Table, the new national average dining time is 6:12 p.m. And even the smart set are dining out earlier before commuting home and being in bed by 10 o'clock. Michael, what's the correct time to eat dinner?
8:30.
I quite agree, actually.
Ooh, that's late.
Oh, here speaks Southport. Come on, then. Do you
you'd be lucky to get a meal in Southport in the week past 7 o'clock, Jane, if at all. 7:30, I'd say, is a good time.
Okay, it's not miles away.
Depends if you have. Well, I mean, you're going back to Brighton, aren't you? So 8:30 is outrageous.
Well, no, I don't get. I mean, let's not get into the commuting times. But I don't walk. Even if I leave work on time, I don't walk into my house until 7:45.
Wow.
I mean, to be fair, I don't do an awful lot of cooking when I get there. But you know, 8:30 is a very reasonable time for dinner, I think.
Yeah, but then you're still in the restaurant. You're pushing 11 before you leave, especially if I have a couple of post-prandials. That's
And what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I was
Nothing-
going to say.
nothing-
Are you
nothing
turn
wrong.
into a pumpkin?
Nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. Yeah.
Would you ever agree to a 6 p.m. dinner date if someone says,
No, that's-
let's have dinner at 6?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically lunch.
Yeah,
I've
I
had
couldn't agree
lunches
more.
that have gone beyond 6 p.m.
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, I'm quite sure. But I mean, 5 o'clock is a late lunch, isn't it? 5 o'clock is just a late continental lunch. 6 o'clock for a dinner date.
It's absolutely. I mean, if I consider the measure of a successful Westminster lunch if I'm still with the person, be it in the original, probably not in the original restaurant, but in a pub afterwards, that is a successful lunch. You know, lunches at
If
this
you're
point
still there when?
At six.
At six,
At 6, right? You lunch 1 till 3:30, pub 3:30 or 4, depending on where the pub is.
I have to
till
say
six,
The
half
that
non-stop grind of a chief political commentator at the Times, everyone.
The Times' expense accounts have been transformed since I worked here
I don't-
15 years ago.
I don't go to particularly salubrious pubs.
In those
Michael,
days, lunch was in the canteen.
what's the latest lunch you've ever had? What time's it gone on till?
I think the blessed sponge of amnesia wipes the slate of memory clean. But there were certainly lunches, to be fair to Patrick, there were certainly lunches when I was his age, because Patrick is still in the prime of his 20s.
I'm 30 now, sadly.
30. Oh, right. Well, Patrick looks younger, I have to
thank
say. But that would have stretched to a point where the dusk was gently falling, and so was I. I'm afraid I lead a slightly more, not Calvinist, but slightly more rigorous existence. So if the Spectator's proprietor is listening, then naturally I conclude my lunchtime business by 2:15 sharp, and then I'm back in the office.
It's just a cold sandwich from the chiller at Pret a Manger, isn't it, Michael?
It is, or sometimes, this is dangerously close to advertising on Times Radio. The Spectator's sister publication, Unheard, has a very nice cafe, the Old Queen Street
certainly
Cafe,
does.
which has become the sort of principal Westminster hangout. And I was somewhat, what's the word? Not embarrassed, but intrigued the other day when I saw a top cabinet minister there having lunch with a newspaper editor, and it was the most unlikely pairing. I was just there munching my chicken schnitzel quietly in the corner, but judging from the tender looks that were exchanged between them, then a new political alliance, perhaps even more intriguing than that between Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau, was being brokered.
Patrick, messaging from Southport for you. The Great Nepalese on Lord Street is open until 9:30.
The Great
Have you
Himalayas.
know?
I was in there
The
not
Great
long ago.
Nepalese. There you go. More from Patrick, Michael, their opening hours and their expense accounts in just a moment. You're listening to Jane Mulkerins on Times Radio. Now, in an interview this week with Amal Rajan, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch revealed that at 11 years old, she slept in a room with 25 other girls, all of whom had machetes under their beds, and that she was also surprised not to have been praised when, at 14 or 15 years old, she dobbed on a classmate cheating in an exam, leading to his expulsion. It's quite a lot to unpack there in that interview. Michael, have you ever slept with a machete under your bed?
No, but it does remind me of the old story about schools in Glasgow, where they had one of those metal gates which you went through in order to determine whether or not you had a knife, and if you didn't, they gave you one. And so no, I have never slept with a machete under my bed.
Have you snitched on anyone or been snitched on?
There was a scandal at my school involving exam papers, which I won't go into now, in which I played a minor part. That was more as the villain rather than as the what's the word? The detective. But that's all in the past now, Your Honour. I think it was Michael Portillo who said that anything any politician does under the age of 21 should never be held against them. And that is something that I cling to.
That is a
I
hard
think
and
that's
fast rule.
completely fair.
Absolutely, hard and fast rule for life, I say, or just anyone
Yes,
under
and
the
no,
age of
quite,
21.
exactly.
Patrick, you seem to me, I know you a little bit, the sort of person who's got no time for snitches.
Yes. Well, I learnt the hard way because I accidentally, we would say grass on Merseyside, obviously. I accidentally grassed the deputy head boy at Birkdale High School out of a job completely by mistake when I was part of the grandiosely named senior leadership team of the prefects at Birkdale High School. I was a mere senior prefect. having been,
Did you get a badge?
yeah, we did actually. I was sort of, I guess you'd call me the Margaret Beckett of that particular election. Came third, was a senior prefect, and one day the headmaster came walking by and said to a group of us, "You weren't smoking on your way home yesterday, Maguire," because a lady rang up and said she saw one of the prefects smoking, and I just said, with no calculation at all, unconsciously, such and such smokes, and then before I knew it, there was a sacking. There was a round of speculation about who would be promoted as deputy. It appeared that I had, in even Michael Gove-like fashion, knifed the deputy head boy to get his job, and in the end I didn't.
But you also didn't even deny that you were smoking. That was quite a clever deflection.
I was not a smoker.
This is brilliant. This should be your play. This is like Brookside meets This City Is Ours.
Who would play you, Patrick?
Who would play me? God, I don't know, Claire Balding, probably.
I was going to say James Corden.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I've had both those in the past.
Michael, I mean, on a serious note, will this help, this sort of confession about snitching and her surprise at not being praised for something that she obviously thought she'd done well, will it help the public warm to her a little bit?
I think there's a very difficult, well, I'm not sure actually, there's a very difficult balancing act that politicians have to perform, which is maintaining authority while being relatable. And we were touching on Keir Starmer earlier. Actually, from what I can tell, Keir Starmer's life is, outside politics, is completely normal. He has a circle of friends who like him. If you were to meet him in ordinary social circumstances, he would be intrinsically relatable, but as a political personality, that doesn't come across at all. And I can identify, because I know Kemi well, I know that in person she is fun. Hilarious and can be a great and mischievous company. But this interview means that side of her personality doesn't seem to come across, which I think, again, it's just one of the challenges when you start talking about your past and your personality, that events can be either taken out of context or presented in a particular way that doesn't do justice to the full sort of depth and range of your personality.
Yeah, it's a bit field of wheat, isn't it?
Yes, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on because we're running out of time and I've got so much to get through with you both. This week, the Home Secretary gamely subjected herself to 5 minutes of quickfire on TikTok. Here she is, Yvette Cooper, pithily explaining the migrant return deal with France, which is now in effect, to the TikTok following of Politics UK.
So then on this one-for-one transfer, if people have been through legal applications, been through security checks, can come to the UK on a one-for-one basis. And of course, we will keep all of the evidence about any criminality, any abuse and any breaches of security checks to make sure that that can be enforced.
It's fair to say it wasn't a resounding success. She also spoke to Simple Politics and the Daily Mail's TikTok. Michael, this particular interview aside, do you think more cabinet ministers and politicians in general should embrace TikTok? I mean, Nigel Farage does.
It takes a real degree of skill to get TikTok right. And at the moment on TikTok, I wouldn't be inclined to hover over a politician. It would be girls from American sororities dancing. That would be the thing that would have me. I think
they're going viral. It's less weird than it sounds.
Exactly.
I know.
That's the thing that's got me glued at the moment, as it were. Now, I wouldn't recommend that Yvette Cooper and Bridget Phillipson emulated the girls of Phi Kappa Delta at the University of Alabama. If they did, that definitely would go viral. However, I think the problem is that TikTok and the whole attention economy requires you to do something flip, smart, quick, witty or grabby, and it's just very, very difficult when you're talking about a migration deal with Bruno Retailleau, the French Interior Minister, to make it compelling.
And you can't merely transpose the thing you do on TV or radio to TikTok. No. As you say, it's its own argot and information ecosystem. Right? There's a reason, you must know who Big John is, Michael.
Yes.
Right, for instance, Big John would not work. You'll have seen Big John. He's the enormous guy who orders
Are we
massive
talking about
Chineses
Robin
and
of
goes,
Sherwood?
bash! Right, that is Big John. No, Big John. Anyway, look him up. He's a sensation, but you never see him on TV because it just wouldn't work.
No.
Nigel Farage is the master of the 5-second, 10-second clip where he says one thing in the language and with the sort of register and bearing of TikTok people. Listening to Yvette Cooper there, that was the sort of bland line to take that you would have heard on, I was going to say this programme, on a lesser Times Radio programme.
Excuse me, Patrick Maguire.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm the minister and the form.
No, it was so dull. You would never have heard it on Times Radio.
No,
Exactly, especially not on my show at 10 o'clock on a Sunday
Very possibly
morning.
the Today programme.
Yes,
or
indeed.
BBC Breakfast.
Thank
one
you
of
for
those.
your allegiance, Michael. You can come back. We are just about out of time. I'm so sorry to say. I had many more stories to get through with you both, but you just have to come back. Thank you so much for being here this morning, and I look forward to your political musicals that I'm expecting you both to write. That's your homework, basically, for next time you're here. I just want at least one act from both of you on a political musical. Michael Gove, Conservative peer, thank you so much. Patrick Maguire, Chief Political... what are you, Chief Political Commentator for the
Thank
Times.
you.
Thank you both so much.